I'm going to hook you up. I'm going to hook you up. But if we look back, and that's what we did in the previous session yesterday, talking about Triple BEE, how far we've come, the challenges, the successes. I want to get from your point of view now. It's been 20 years since the Act was introduced. Why is it critical that we reflect on the legislation and transformation journey that we've traveled in this country so far?
Well, thank you very much for having me. And as he departs, let me acknowledge the Premier.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you so much.
And to say, Premier, we are still in the same boat and working together. So no offense meant. Yeah, he did take a jibe at me.
Did he take a jibe at you? So
now he had wanted me to be the Director General of the province, and I was looking forward to having served for so long at the national level, to coming lower to the ground in the province. It's also my province.
Absolutely. Gauteng, also your home province.
Also my province, but our paths will cross definitely. BEE creates so much conversation, for good or worse, and I appreciate that. You know that the subject still attracts so much interest. This event itself, proof of that. The last 3 weeks, almost every week, I am at one or the other event talking about the same thing. The reason is because this is a journey. We are still en route to the vision. You know, it's important that we have context about when we talk about BEE, and this answers your question, because it arises out of the constitution on which South Africa is founded, which is a constitution that requires of us to recognize that South Africa is an unequal society, that a minority of the population owns and controls the majority of the wealth, the majority of the economy, and that we are going to do something about that. And BEE was one of the instruments that we created to correct that, to promote economic justice. And I think it's obvious that that task has not yet been achieved, and that we have to constantly be reviewing why is it not achieving, at least as rapidly as possible, this redress of economic justice. And one of the reasons for that is because, and this is typically what happens with legislation, is that we establish legislation, but we don't always say, how will we know that we're succeeding? How will we know that we're succeeding? And I think that's the problem with BEE, because it's possible for somebody to say that BEE is a total failure. That would be an incorrect view. I think you know that. Equally, it would not be correct to say that it is totally successful. Yeah. But we can see evidence of it. You know, today, we have a very large part of the black middle class being black people. We have thousands of enterprises that are suppliers to government and other corporates who are entrepreneurs, who, it turns out, actually are 100% owners of their businesses. We got to make sure that we build on that and massify that, as it were. The earlier phase of BEE was what I call celebrity deals of individuals. That phase of BEE is gone. The phase that I think excites me is where we are deliberately creating entrepreneurs and enterprises which is what the growth of the economy is going to come from. And the solution is unemployment. It's going to come from entrepreneurs who build businesses that they own and they control. So that's to respond to your question.
And I suppose that comes, there's a lot that comes into play, because that's the obvious thing, is the entrepreneurs, but they can only emerge in a growing economy, and that's what we need to see happening. So everything is a key to come together. I mean, today could be a big turning point in our cycle in terms of the economy maybe turning around. We've got the interest rate decision that is coming out this afternoon. We'll all be in conference, so we'll get that announcement, whether or not the Reserve Bank governor is actually going to leave them unchanged, drop them, or even make them higher. We don't know as yet, but the signs are there. The signs are there that things are getting better. However, it's to capitalize on it and to ensure that the middle class, which is the one that's really struggling at the moment, and entrepreneurs are the ones that are able to succeed in this environment. And is it the act that's going to help them? I mean, is empowerment going to help them? Or there's a lot of criticism around it, and let's perhaps talk about that. Media have spoken about it and said there's been a misrepresentation of the BBBEE laws as the current affirmative action laws have been amended. So how does the recent amendment of affirmative action laws relate to the misrepresentation of the BEE laws in the media? And perhaps you can provide clarification on the differences between the two of them.
Yeah, no, I know. I did see that confusion in the media. The amendments are the amendments to the Employment Equity Act, which is a key pillar of the empowerment legislation. So, BEE and the whole transformation effort is based on an ecosystem, requires an ecosystem, all right? Which is that all the laws that are promoting positive change. So employment equity is one of them. Skills development is another. The Companies Act, the Competition Act, and so on and so forth. All of these laws have to work together to deliver the outcome that we're looking for. And so those amendments were on a very, very crucial piece of the puzzle, if you like, to deal with employment equity. And again, by the way, in employment equity is where you see the most visible change that has happened now. I mean, we're sitting here with Nedbank. All the top executives of Nedbank here are black people, thanks to employment equity. Women are managers, directors, they sit on board, thanks to employment equity. What the amendment did was to actually empower localities to determine. It's hard to set, one-size-fits-all targets, for employment equity. For BE too, on procurement, the same thing happened with procurement. That judgment said that, enterprises should set targets, procurement targets, and so on. The Minister of Finance couldn't do that. So it is actually devolving decision-making, devolving, authority to the lowest level in a locality about, what is feasible in terms of employment equity. So it's a very progressive change. It was misunderstood. Thankfully, the minister has been engaging with the industry, and so I think there's convergence as to how that will work out in the end.
So in 2003, we saw the whole issue of broad-based economic empowerment actually coming into the fore. But by then, South Africa had long started on its journey to empowerment and transformation, of course, with the BEE transactions having taken place as early as pre-1994. Perhaps you want to just give us a little bit of history of this and chronicle that journey that we have traversed.
Yeah, well, before 1994, there were already emerging business leaders who were embarking on, quite ambitious, forward-looking initiatives on their own, without the support of the state. The crucial thing was that recognizing that, in fact, that's the way the country must go,
Yeah.
we needed to develop a framework that makes sure that this process is a national process. It's a national project, and it is a guided project. It is guided by the policies, the rules, as it did. That was the crucial difference. But yeah, they are pioneers. The likes of, for example, the late Dr. Motlana, or Maponyas, and a few of those. But there were few. There were few. So the point was that let's create an environment where there will be more and more of those pioneers, as it were, and we've succeeded.
Yeah.
But as I said, the emphasis is not so much on the individuals now. That's why the amendment also deliberately included the broad-based.
Yeah.
That this thing must be massive. It must be inclusive. It must include all of the country, not only the urban areas, the rural areas, and some of the mining activities, the big mining corporates, they actually have their operations in rural areas.
Yeah.
And they are having the responsibility to uplift people in the localities in which they work. So we have a good framework. It's not working perfectly. Nobody will say it's working perfectly, but let's not make the mistake of throwing it out simply because it's associated with some individual or corruption somewhere, and we've seen that. There are some deals which were corrupt, or for example, fronting, the practice of fronting, where business people, white business people, use their workers, gardeners,
Yeah.
as directors, but without any benefit in the end. And by the way, the commission is established, amongst others, to deal with that because it's now a crime in the law to engage in fronting. We are sitting right now, for example, with 1,500 complaints of crude, racist fronting using black people because you want to qualify for a tender in government or from a tender with another corporate. So there are practices like those that we must deal with, but we must preserve this. We must preserve this instrument. It's too fundamental for the future of this country to change the future in a positive way, particularly in a week where we've kind of commemorated Mandela Day. The late President Mandela had a vision that will be a country that takes instructions from the past to build a future, and it will be a future that is based on the principles of equality and inclusion, as it were.
So let's look again a little bit further into it, because there is corruption, there is fronting, and I'm glad that this is being dealt with. So in its current form, that's something where we're obviously seeing loopholes and people are taking advantage of it. So that's something that needs to be changed. But there is the school of thought, and I'll get a little bit political now, because you kind of look at something like a political party like the DA that say it shouldn't be like that. It should be the best man or woman for the job, because we are in an economic downturn here in the country. There aren't jobs being created. We are seeing skills being lost overseas to countries where people are going and finding other opportunities because they just cannot get a job in South Africa, no matter how hard they try. And in that way, we're losing skills. So there's this fine balancing act, and perhaps we can address that, because that, I think, is quite an important issue to address. As much as there are huge positives, and we can see those positives, but at this point, do we worry about what we're losing as opposed to what we're gaining? Because it doesn't seem like the country is benefiting right now. Or perhaps you just want to touch on that.
No, it is a false opposition. It is a false conflict that is being created between economic growth and transformation. The reality is that if you look at the structure of the economy right now, with the majority of the economy being in white hands, so, owned by white people, it's only a limited number of companies, it's a limited number of industries, that are supposed to drive this economy. We need more. We need to include more and more people in those industries. The market on its own doesn't do it because there are all sorts of barriers. There are all sorts of disadvantages, challenges. We talk about access to finance, all right? We have one of the most concentrated economy that makes it very difficult for small enterprises to enter into those value chains as suppliers or participants in one form or another in those industries. So let's create more industries, more enterprises that will inevitably, the demographics will say they'll come from black people. So let's be deliberate and make it possible, because that's where the jobs are. Those are the people who are going to create jobs. Otherwise, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like it's okay for the white people to be the owners of industries, and the black people must be the workers. All right? So how are black people going to create jobs if they're not inside the economy, if they're not in the mainstream, if they don't have access to the productive levers of the economy? That's the whole thing. So it's a false dichotomy. I hear, because you say, I know, these black people creates a few, BEE creates a few black billionaires. Yeah. We shouldn't quarrel about that. In fact, we need more billionaires, who create jobs, who create industries. And I think it's possible. One of the things which I feel very strongly about is that if it's difficult, as it is, for black people to access established industries, well, actually, we have an opportunity to be deliberate and say new industries, high technology-based industries, just transition, green economy, renewables. Those are new industries that we should be deliberate as a start. Black people must be in the starting blocks. It's difficult to come after, all right? Because a lot of people say, I built, my grandparents built this business, why must I include you? Okay, maybe there's an argument there, but new industries, why are black people not being deliberately included in a massive way in new industries?
Yeah.
I watch, for example, the online retail platforms, which are still owned by white people. All right, so as you can see, there are massive opportunities on enterprise and supplier development, and opportunities that are created by by technology and digital transition.
So I had, and it was also arranged by Topco Media, one of the most interesting interviews I ever did was with will.i.am. So indulge in me, because we were talking about the future of technology, and he was very passionate. It was earlier this year, and it was the first AI interview ever done on the African continent, but it was, when I say AI, he was literally sitting on the stage, but in a box. It looked like the real thing. It was unbelievable. But what we spoke about was exactly what you're saying, is that in many, because he also comes from a very poor community, but he's managed to succeed in the world of music. But there's such a change happening in the world. There are so many new industries that are being created and so many new opportunities that are being created that he was the one who was saying, you have no excuse at the moment to be left out, because you need to create those opportunities. We're at the verge now of saying, that was then, this is now. We need to create. We need to change. We need to do it our way. And that's kind of what we need. And so, but my fear with all of that, and I know we're going to be coming to an end quite soon, but as I said to you a bit earlier, everything links together, but the skills are what we're worried about. Does that worry you as well? Because as much as we want to create new industries, we want to create new job opportunities, and yes, we are losing talent that can't necessarily get those jobs, but are we skilling the black entrepreneurs and people in the country that can fill those roles and perhaps do a better job? And that's the worry, is that the skills transfer is not happening and the education system's letting us down.
Not true. So we've got to fix the foundation.
Yeah.
All right, and that speaks to education. Fixing the education, fixing the results, the outcomes from education, and making sure that young people are empowered in the skills of the future.
Yeah.
I think we all have accepted that that's what we must do. I think it's the responsibility of leaders, political leaders, ministers, senior executives in government who are responsible for the education system to make sure that we fix that.
Yeah.
The private sector has a very, very important role to play. All right, and so next to enterprise and supply development, skills development is one of the most important elements in the whole system of BEE. We got to make it work. And so I heard there's somebody from the YES program.
Yes, we had Robbie. I don't know if he's here now, but he was here yesterday.
A very important initiative that gives young people who...
That's our gentle reminder to start rapping.
Yeah.
See how nice and gentle it is.
So, yeah. So that is a big issue.
Yeah.
No country can develop without a solid foundation of education, and no transformation can occur without people who are equipped to take advantage of the opportunities. We are a developing country with an enormous positive future. We are well endowed. We are very lucky to live in this country that offers so many possibilities and that is so connected to the world. But we must make sure that all South Africans equitably are part of that journey and they participate in building the future.
Amazing. I'm going to leave it there. We heard the little tinkle, and it was so good speaking to you. Good luck going forward, and it's a pleasure having him. Let's give him one more round of applause. That, of course, is our Triple BEE Commissioner of South Africa. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, Tadiso Matona. Okay, I've been waiting for almost 2 days now to hear the tinkle, and I heard it. It's lovely. It's nice and gentle. It isn't a big gong that says, get off the stage. It was a nice one. So I'm not sure if we've seen this as yet, but I know that there's a beautiful billboard that's doing the rounds, and we thank very much so our media partner, that's Prime Media, out for sponsoring us with the billboards that you've seen around Johannesburg and Cape Town. So it really is an absolute pleasure to say thank you to them, and we also ask our delegates to visit the lounge area where other sponsor booths are there, and you can go and enjoy looking at them. But now, after I really enjoyed that conversation, and I'm looking forward to this conversation, because this one is entitled Defining the 21st Century Leadership for Purpose-Led Transformation in Africa. And this discussion will really explore leadership for purpose-led transformation in Africa, focusing in on key areas as addressing Africa's past and future, achieving a just transition, propelling Africa's economy, and fostering cooperation and healthy competition in developing a 21st century leadership aligned with purpose. So ladies and gentlemen, to help us navigate this topic, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the chairperson of the Nedbank Group onto the stage, Daniel Nele, and Mfundo Nkuhlu, the Chief Operating Officer of Nedbank. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Good to see you again. Thanks, Mfundo. Thank you so much, Daniel. Good to see you.
Where do you want us?
Yeah, have a seat there. I'll sit wherever you want. Okay.
No, that's too far. Yeah. I come and sit next
That's
to you.
it. There we go. Well done.
That's good.
Well done. You run a bank. You're not worried about seating arrangements.
In
I don't blame you.
November
I don't,
revised
I
our
don't blame
CSI strategy to focus on 4 key areas of the green economy that are critical to both the economy and the well-being of communities: agriculture, water, energy, and waste. Our partnership with Indalo Inclusive, an organization dedicated to creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem that supports the green economy in South Africa by identifying potential entrepreneurs and providing a range of support to them, enables the delivery of measurable benefits and results in creating green entrepreneurs.
All right, gentlemen, again, thank you so much for sponsoring this event. I think it is so important because, as we know, this wouldn't be possible if Nedbank didn't come behind this and ensure that we could actually pull this one off. So thank you very, very much. And this is a question to both of you because it's an important opening point that perhaps I can start off with you, Daniel, in terms of the key issues that are facing us in South Africa and as a continent. We've spoken about so many of them yesterday, and we've started talking about it today. But perhaps from your perspective, talk us through the key issues.
Thanks very much, Leanne, and good morning to everyone here present, our hosts and our distinguished guests, people that have availed their time to be on the panels. And yes, I'm looking forward to this discussion with my esteemed colleague Mfundo here. Look, as you said, quite a number of the themes kind of have featured during the conference, and I thought we had a very good start yesterday. Certainly the sessions that I've been able to attend yesterday were quite insightful. Now, in terms of the key issues that would be facing us, South Africa, and the continent, I guess there are certain themes that are common. And there are others that would be, I think, very South Africa specific. The common themes, I guess, would relate, and obviously we could have a whole conference around that, but if I were to lift out some of the key ones, I guess the common ones would be how we are grappling with the aftermath of the COVID crisis in the way in which it has impacted sort of macroeconomic developments, particularly growth and inflation dynamics, the fallouts that we're seeing from that, the cost of living crisis, and how that has also accentuated pre-existing challenges around issues such as sovereign debt. Climate finance is another big one, which obviously was the central tenet of Terrence's speech this morning, but featured yesterday similarly as well. How we transition our economies to be low carbon economies, to make our societies more climate resilient, the concept of just transition and the framework that Terrence was proposing, very, very important issues. And he gave you a whole host of statistics and numbers and all of that. But if there's one that I think ought to make us sit up around the urgency of what we're dealing with, you and Terence touched yesterday on tornadoes and their impacts, more regular droughts and floods and what we're seeing. I think if there's one statistic that should make us sit up around the urgency is that on average, on the continent, the temperature rises are occurring at twice the speed of the global average. So it's a really, really burning issue that we need to look at. And the third key issue I would point out that is a common issue is around the geopolitical fragmentation and the tensions ensuing from that have led to war, and essentially how, as South Africa, as African countries, we position ourselves as the big battle is raging between the big guys to make sure that we avoid own goals that could be to the detriment of our own long-term interests and harm our credibility and standing in the world. Just coming closer to home, again, in Mfundo's opening address yesterday, he covered the ground quite well there. I would say the most pressing issues, of course, is getting economic growth going again, to address the systemic challenges that we have of obviously unemployment, inequality, and poverty. And the biggest ticket to that game is, of course, making sure that we have energy, sufficient energy supply, energy securities to power that growth, and make sure that as we fix those problems, we also transition to more sustainable sources of energy. The second big cluster is the bottlenecks that we're seeing around our transport and logistics, our rail and port infrastructure, which in a way have not allowed us in a sufficient way to at least benefit from issues such as sort of exchange rate developments where the currency weakens in terms of throughputs through our ports and export volumes as such. So those are issues that need to be urgently looked at. And the third complex is the one again which is featured around crime, corruption, governance, rule of law. But of course, these are all issues, Leanne, that are on one side of the coin. There's another side of the coin here, which has to deal with potential, with opportunity that has also been touched upon. And that list is at least as long as the one that I've just highlighted of some of the key, more problematic issues. The demographic dividend has been talked about. Yesterday we heard about sort of a mineral wealth and actually the kind of stuff that the world needs as it transitions. We've got excellent wind, solar, biothermal, hydro resources. So there are massive investment needs, opportunities to power these infrastructure developments on the continent, digitization, AI, and so forth. But the key issues, now coming back to the theme here, and I'll stop just now, is that we have been for a while now at the crossroads. We've been at the fork in the road, and time is running out for us to make decisions. And some of those decisions will be tough, and we can either, one option is to say the path that we are on, the proverbial sticking of the head in the sand is the one we continue along. And I guess with some strategy of hope, but needless to say that does not just risk catastrophic outcomes, it almost guarantees them. And I think the far more attractive options, of course, are some of the issues that Mfundo also touched upon yesterday, around bold, courageous, and decisive leadership driven by common purpose, alignment of goals, a collaborative approach, sense of urgency, as we've just said, and making sure that we've got the right governance, accountability framework. So it stands and falls with leadership. And let me leave it at that for now.
Yeah, and I'm loving that everything is aligned. Everybody seems to have the same picture of what the problems are, how we need to solve them, and also the positives. Mfundo, I know during your opening yesterday, you highlighted a lot of this. I'm not sure if you, after what you've heard throughout the day yesterday or anything this morning, that you want to add to it, because you gave us those 3 priorities that I believe by just mentioning them actually set the tone for the entire day, which I thought was very important. Very important.
Yes, thank you, Lilian. Yes, we can build on that, and I've followed the conversations throughout yesterday, and we're picking on those themes today. Perhaps let me start with some home truths. To lead, you must be willing to be led. It starts there. And so if we take that approach to things, then it recognizes that leadership is exercised and available at multiple levels. You do not lead just because you're at the top of the organization. Sometimes expertise resides elsewhere, and that is what provides leadership. So we've got to have an elastic sense of what leadership is about. Second, the very concept of transformation itself, in my view, has 2 major elements. We can talk of transformation as a redress of the historical wrongs. And largely in the South African conversation, that is how we talk about transformation. And so we've got to overcome the legacy of the past, prepare ourselves to go forward. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a historical reality, and we've got to start there. But there's also another element of transformation that deals with a forward-looking society driven by innovation. And some of those imperatives reside outside of our immediate society. The world is evolving, the world is innovating. Change is our only real constant, if you like. And as a society, we dare not fall behind others. And so we've got to keep propelling ourselves, moving forward, cultivating an environment that encourages innovation, modernization. And so I look at the combination of the two as critical for how leadership expresses itself. And so when we look at things from that vantage point, I think as Africa, we must come back and say, there's this notion of the curse of the resources, okay? We have all this resource endowment, minerals, and all of that, which has not really led to our development. These minerals have been externalized, exported, led to growth and development of other parts of the world. If you think now of the energy transition, so-called just energy transition that is underway, a world that is moving away from carbon intensity. Again, Africa cannot fall behind on that. We have endowments of nature, be it sun, wind, water. Namibia was talking yesterday of hydrogen. And so we've got to be at the cutting edge of those developments. And oftentimes, the argument is, no, we've fallen behind. We still need to address where we are.
Yeah.
And my own sense is that some of these solutions are going to come from a different level of thinking and a different level of action than historically was the case. And so we've got to have a disposition that we want to participate in the new evolutions that are taking place. And you think of a digital transformation that is taking place, the disruption that is coming up with that. Oftentimes we also talk about that as a future yet to come. But actually, we're in it already. We're in it already. And Leanne, when we examine how we deal with these things, even our education system, you touched on that in the previous conversation, it is still delivered largely in a traditional way. And then you ask yourself, but how are we going to get the skills necessary to address this future? Because it's not just the skills and competencies, but it's also lifestyle changes. How do we align all of these things as society so that we can evolve quicker, leapfrog, and meet the competition where the game is played? My own sense is that as Africa, we collaborate and compete with the rest of the world. And perhaps we do need to emphasize a lot more our ability to compete effectively on the terms the game is played in.
Yeah. I love what you were saying, and you sort of made me go back to an interview I did earlier this year with one of our ministers in terms of where we're at with 5G and technologically, and that same thing that we're falling behind. And I was saying, but listen, the world is now preparing for 6G because 6G is coming in 2030. The minister stopped me straight away and said, stop worrying about 6G, let's finish 5G first. And I'm like, so I had to giggle because I mean, it's there, it's happening. So we can't always be playing catch up. And the danger with playing catch up the whole time is that this is a young continent, and the youth are the ones that need to benefit from this. I mean, if we look at what is being predicted, and I mean, this is I know, Mfundo, you're going to speak a little bit about this, but when you look at the World Bank, it is projecting that by 2060, the sub-Saharan population is going to be 2.6 billion people out of a world of 10 billion. Okay, now that is scary, and with AI and technology stealing jobs and doing things that we used to do, this is something we really need to focus on. So I think my question to you is, and perhaps you'll elaborate on all of this, what needs to be put in place so that the continent can gain in these opportunities. And let's focus on the youth particularly.
Yes, indeed. That's the so-called demographic dividend that the African youth is going to be in excess of 40% of the youth of the world. That should give us the platform for growth. You do need a young, active, meaningfully engaged population in order to drive growth. These usually are the years of creativity of a population. What we need to overcome as Africa is we've got to go beyond potential. I almost recoil at the word potential, because we often tout the potentialities that we have. And that, to me, emphasizes that we've not translated them sufficiently into reality. And so we're always selling that we have a potential to do this. Some of those we've got to translate, and everybody sees that actually we've done these things. So it's important to make sure that we're not just selling the fact that Africa is a young population. Because if that young population does not have a purchasing power, then it will be a restless population. Then we will get the negatives of a young, unemployed, and an unemployable population. So we've got to be now addressing the skills requirements, the education outcomes, the employability of our people, giving them capability to be entrepreneurs and establish own businesses, not just be employees, but create jobs. But actually, if you think about it, even when you talk of entrepreneurship, to be an effective entrepreneur, you've got to know something about what you want to do. You've got to have the skills to execute on what you want to do. So we often talk of entrepreneurship as an alternative to addressing our unemployment challenge. But actually, we've got to be skilling our society, skilling our young people, and then we give them the power to make own choices in life. And then they interact with institutions such as ours, say, okay, can we fund these opportunities? Can we have confidence in them to back them and provide capital that will propel them forward?
Yeah.
I think that is what Africa is calling for.
Daniel, would you like to add to
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with the points that Mfundo was making, and he almost made me smile because, somebody not so long ago said to me, he says, 20 years ago, Africa was a continent with great potential, and nothing has changed. And you're absolutely right. We really need to move from that. We need to get out of that narrative of telling people what great potential we've got that never gets realized. And we just keep telling people about this blue sky that we had. And I think the key point to emphasize and align in terms of what you said earlier, Mfundo, is also this requirement of a more holistic and integrated thinking around how we address the problems, the issues of leapfrogging. The game of catch-up of old doesn't work anymore, just because the rate of change is so exponential that we can't afford to be left behind, because you won't ever catch up, because things are moving at a much faster rate than what maybe you could do previous, and says, look, and then we invest and there's the step change and we are on par again. So once you get left behind, that's where we're going to be. So there is no alternative to us embracing technological advancement, because these waves are unstoppable. It's coming, and we have to embrace the digital revolution, disruptive as it will be, and we have to accept that. There's the only way we become future-proof, and again, continuously invest in skills and education, innovate in the way of how knowledge is disseminated, and again, just to endorse what you just said, particularly if we look at sort of technology as such, and looking at the industry that we are in, great sort of catalytic role that we can play there, not just because we're generally sort of technology driven and tech heavy, But exactly because of what Mfundo was saying, because of the decisions that we take in our intermediary role in terms of lending and investment decisions that touch pretty much all corners of society, make us really very uniquely placed, as I say, to be catalytic and allow this to happen. And of course, very, very critical to that is that we require cross-border collaboration, which is needs to be driven by a leadership that is bound by sort of a joint vision and almost a single-mindedness of how we want to push this continent and forward, and a leadership that is prepared to be held accountable, a leadership that is honest and levels with the citizens around some of the trade-off, some of the difficult decisions, some of the pain that may need to be taken in the short term for long-term gain, and of course a leadership that is seen to be taking the pain with the people as opposed to prescribing pain that others must take while we don't see it. So right across the continent, key is to invest in skills and in the youth, and exactly to avoid what Mfundo was saying. We don't want the democratic dividend to turn into a demographic fiasco.
Yeah.
In the manner that if these cohort of people ever get to a point where they think they've got nothing to lose, we are in really a difficult position, because we know what people do that think they've got nothing to lose. They will trash this place.
And we kind of saw it happening. We don't want to talk about the July unrest, we really don't, but that is, unfortunately, when you have a disgruntled and a restless population. I love the word you used, restless. And as for your quote that you said earlier, I'm going to steal it, if that's okay. Did you steal it from someone? About what Africa has great potential.
No, somebody said it to me.
Oh, someone said it to you. Okay, so I'm going to say that someone told you, and I didn't. You can't own it. We'll find the owner. I love that. We've had potential. We've still got great potential. So that is my question to you, Mfundo. So we've got this great potential that we've had for so long, and I agree with you. I'm sick of talking about the potential. But do we have what it takes to compete? Because at the end of the day, how do we change this environment to actually compete?
Yes, indeed. We started with an identification of a reality that we have a young population. There are implications that flow from exactly that, Leanne. First of all, Africa is one of the fastest urbanizing regions of the world, precisely because we have a youthful population. So we've got to then say, cities is where it should be happening for us. The agglomeration effects of development of cities must align with the objectives of industrialization, building industries. Of course, these industries also leverage the agricultural strengths that we have as a society. And so we build agro-processing industry on the back of the agricultural strength. We build industries on the back of our mining resources. But Africa, I think, has to think differently about what's happening in the cities. You travel all the continent, you kind of get sometimes a congestion, a poor planning, poor effects of this. I think over time, these undermine development. And so we've got to be forward-looking about the role that cities will play in our lives as centers of concentration, both of people and opportunities. And so I do think that when we address those, we're setting ourselves to compete effectively. When we talk about overcoming some of our structural and sectoral constraints, really the delivery of that infrastructure has to also address concentrations of where people live, where lifestyle is generated, where interaction happens, where mass transportation occurs. And so these, for me, are the foundations of how we can set our societies to compete effectively. Then, over and above that, a greater sense of urgency, a greater sense of speed in delivering the things that we agree on. we now can say, okay, a decision has been taken to auction the spectrum. We're preparing ourselves for 5G. That decision took 10 years. And no wonder we're delivering 5G at a time when others are talking of 6G. So we've got to address speed of execution once we agree on what to do.
Yeah, we heard the minister speaking about that yesterday, that an email that was sent 3 years ago will only land up in her inbox then.
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything?
Look, yeah, I mean, just to add to that, what does it take for us to be able to compete? I guess it goes without saying that we need to redouble our efforts, we need to invest, and we need to upgrade in the manner that we do. But I do want to maybe put the spotlight on slightly different sort of perspective in terms of how and what is needed to compete. It may sound like, playing victim again, but it is important to raise these issues. And what I thought was encouraging was the most recent summit that took place in Paris, that global sort of finance summit that was spearheaded by Premier Mosley and the French president. So finally, some of the difficult issues are starting to move to the center of the discussion table from a point of view of creating a level playing field for us to be able to compete, and certainly issues that have to deal with the fault lines in the global financial system are being discussed now, critically so. And these are things that have made it difficult for us to compete fairly, and they're now slowly being debated in an open manner. Certainly from my involvement in sort of international relations 7 years ago or so, it would have been very difficult to have a very serious discussion about the reform of the multilateral development banks, international financial institutions, thinking about the international financial architecture and how that needs to be changed. So those discussions are very, very important to enable us to compete, and issues such as are being discussed now, a seat for the AU on the UN Security Council, similar discussions around getting a seat at the G20, because at the moment, South Africa is only G20 a member and is the premier forum for international coordination and development. So those kind of things are very important. We need to, the playing field needs to be leveled there. And to be clear, we're not asking for cheap favors. We want just to be able to compete fairly, but in that also taking into account that the starting points would be different from where we come from. Another issue that I think impedes competition and is required for us to be able to compete fairly has to do with risk perceptions. And that is something that we encounter all the time, that there is a mispricing of risks when it comes to certain projects and views of the continent in such a way that the compensation demanded is very disproportionate to the underlying risks, and that needs to be addressed. Having said that, in English they say help comes to those who try. Yeah. So we also need to play our role in making sure that, as we said earlier, governance and accountability frameworks are right, our reporting and disclosure standards, policy certainty, and so forth are all things that we embrace, will not allow or give people an excuse to just slam sort of uncertainty premiums onto the pricing that we pay. So this is very, very critical, given that for this transformation that we need, particularly with regard to the area of climate finance, as was discussed, we need to raise finance at scale. Yeah. And it needs to be affordable, and we need to make sure that is done fairly, that we don't get into a situation where we potentially, while trying to solve the problem of climate change and make our contribution to the global effort, we do not inadvertently find ourselves creating a new problem, for instance, that has to do with climate-related debt being loaded up.
Yeah, and I know at this particular summit you're referring to, it was the president of Zambia that actually came in, Hakainde Hichilema, and was saying that we don't want to meet in 4 years' time and be discussing the same issue. Something needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast. And that's the reality, is finding new finance solutions. So
Yeah, he made a very strong contribution at the Paris Summit.
which is good to know. It's very good to know. I suppose another question, Mfundo, is, you know, we've spoken a lot about what we need to do, but the reality is we need to stay relevant. You know, yesterday somebody was, again, just talking about the fact that we're at, it was on my panel, I don't know, it wasn't Dr. Pause, it was somebody else just saying, oh, it was Cass. We're a tiny little drop in the ocean, right on the bottom of Africa. And I mean, yes, it's a continent, but the reality is, how do we stay relevant in this rapid changing world? Because there is so much happening, and how the world operates is changing. And I know obviously the green route is the way with regard to low carbon economies, digital disruption. How do we stay relevant?
First of all, we've got to do the best that we can where we are with what we have. It starts there. We're not going to change the world all at once, but in the assignment that I have, in how I show up every day, am I giving the best of myself? Second, in our own country, with its challenges, are we putting our best foot forward? Okay? As a region and as a continent, can we aggregate then those positives? Oftentimes we talk of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. It too is not going to just solve magically all our issues. We've got to be deliberate about it. When you open up trade, you know, you must simultaneously be thinking, what does it mean to the mobility of populations? You can't open up the movement of goods without a view on what happens to human movement. And then, how do we solve for that in our given reality, particularly given the inequality that exists not only within nations, but also between nations? So we've got to be thinking about these things more holistically, and then having realistic time frames on how we execute over them. I do think that development process requires serious and sustained conversations between the key actors: business, government, unions, society. There's a bit of that in our country, but probably not enough if you look at the challenges that we have and how slowly we resolve some of these. And we will need to do that and expect that also other societies are doing the same. So in a sense, we all have to meet one another halfway. We will have to place demands on the rest of the world so that we have a fair deal. But by the same token, we've got to be pushing through that door. We've got to be pulling ourselves by the bootstraps. So we've got to move from a premise that the world owes us nothing, whatever the history may have been, that we owe it to ourselves to put our A game. And then when we make these demands, then there's no excuse, because they can also see that we're ready to play as equal partners. I think that is what the moment calls for.
Absolutely, loving it. Gentlemen, I think so. I want to carry on speaking to you the whole time, but Daniel, I'll just give you a chance to sort of put on
just
there.
Quickly a footnote onto that. Very well put. The only thing I'd add in reference to what was said yesterday is that in doing that, and in terms of what Mfundo has been saying, I think we can afford to be a little bit more confident.
Good.
Than
I like
indicating that we're somewhere at the bottom of the African continent. We're so small. So what we need to do, this space that's been opened up for the African voice to be better heard, we need to move into those spaces. I'm busy with my microphone here. We need to move into those spaces and make sure that rather than seeing ourselves as price takers of some sort, rather than seeing ourselves as victims of some big global changes that are happening, we've got to get behind that. We've got to be part of the forces that drive that change. We've got to make sure that we shape and we influence those agendas. And it's not like we haven't got anything to offer. I mean, if we look at this country, we've got a significant contribution to make. Again, going back to climate change, I mean, the innovative approaches that we have, shown to the world with things like structures like the Presidential Climate Commission, the Just Transition Framework, which was developed in a very consultative and participatory approach, are things that we can share with people. That's what makes us remain relevant, with people saying, like, okay, from that part of the world, here are solutions that the globe can benefit from. Things like the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan that we put on the table last year at COP27, the first of its kind in the world. South Africa demonstrated global leadership in putting those things forward. So the only footnote I'd put is say, look, we can move in there with a little bit more confidence.
We can move with the big boys. We can. That goes without saying. Gentlemen, I've got to wrap this up. I don't want to, because there's so many more issues I want to quiz you on. Because, I mean, Nedbank is everywhere. You're on the continent. You're operating everywhere. We don't want to be seen as a big brother as a country, South Africa, because sometimes we are seen that way. But we do have a massive role to play in keeping stability, creating a great area. The SADC region is important for not only us, but for the continent as well. I mean, you're in Namibia, Mozambique, Eswatini, Zimbabwe. I mean, the list goes on. We need to propel the African economy. We need to do that. So, Mfundo, I'm going to leave it to you to wrap up, and then Daniel, for you to just give us some closing comments as well.
Yes, indeed, Leanne. We operate across the subcontinent, having presence in SADC countries. We see that as the home base. We may be a major banking group in South Africa, but our theater is actually Southern Africa, with aspirations to play on the larger continent. We have presence in West Africa through an equity investment that we hold in a banking group there. And so our vision is always continental. We, as a bank, we've availed our balance sheet to underwrite the just transition, energy transition that is underway. We've invested heavily in renewables, and we will see this as an opportunity for multi-year growth. And so we expect that we will be underwriting very many transactions to solve our energy crisis. We see this as a continuity with our operations in the countries in our neighborhood. And so the skills, competencies, and abilities that we have as a group, we extend those for the reach across the continent. I think it's a fair point to make that as South Africa, we will find our way in the world through being relevant to Africa as our continent. Not avoiding it, but through Africa. That is how we will find our rightful place in the world.
Amazing. Daniel?
Very much support that. And of course, regional integration is obviously what Mfundo is speaking to, is very, very central to them. And the world, as you know, is moving in big regional blocks and as such. So harnessing, getting a SADC off the ground, and eventually, obviously, the continental structures is very, very important. And one area that, of course, was touched upon is the free trade agreement. If there's anything that one could say might have been positive to come out of COVID, is that there is now much more focus and attention being paid to regional supply chains. When people previously had gone into this super specialized, super productivity sort of drives on getting things in time at the cheapest cost and that type of thing, now people are saying, look, maybe I'll pay a premium, but I'll have sort of reliability of supply, and I can. So that gives an opportunity for us on the continent to work with each other and make sure that the intra-African trade is at a much higher level than it is now, and gets to kind of get closer to what we see in other parts of the world. So I guess, Liam, by way of final comments, again, we said leadership is critical to this. So we need to build our talent pool. We need to ensure that our future leaders are driven by a sense of purpose, which will allow them to drive transformational change that is sustainable, that we use all the tools that are at our disposal in terms of investment in skills, in education, helping to connect our future leaders with our current leaders through the tools such as mentorships and coaching and broadening their networks and domestically and internationally. Creating innovative financing solutions is also featured, and upskilling and growing our workforce and very much making sure that we can compete with the best in the world along the theme of that new word we learned yesterday. What was it? Competition?
Yes, competition. That's it, yes.
And of course, we need leaders that keep up to speed, that understand the interconnectedness of the challenges that we face, the ever-increasing complexity, and that there is no alternative to joining forces, and critically, public-private partnerships that are very, very important to understand that these are problems that we can't just sit and say, look, we are helping or we are supporting government in taking certain of these issues. These are very much problems of our own, and this integrated and holistic approach at the end of the day is also part and parcel of how we earn our social license to operate.
Chair, thank you. Thank you so, so much. It's been wonderful speaking to both of you. Let's wrap it up. Mfundo, thank you very, very much as well. Please, let's give them a round of applause as I release them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you again. And important lessons and important stories being told there. So we're going to just lead into our final conversation now, just before we wrap up and take a little bit of a break. You can have some coffee and snacks, and then we'll come in again afterwards. So when we look at this part, we were actually meant to do this yesterday, but we've moved it to today instead. And this is the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation, and this is going to be quite an interesting one as well. This is called Equity in the Digital Age, Digital Transformation for Diversity and Inclusion. That's the topic of this particular one. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first distinguished speaker. And this speaker for today's session will be joining us virtually. Another thing, thanks to COVID, that we don't all have to be in the same room in order to be part of a conference. We can be all over the place, including yesterday we had 6,000 people watching. I'm not sure how many today, but that's the power of being able to do things virtually. But joining us virtually this morning, please join me in extending a warm welcome to Malebo Mabichi-Thompson. She is the Deputy Director General of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And the case study that she's going to be presenting to us is Transformation Funding, the Influence of Government Policy on Funding Criteria. DDG, good morning to you.
Good morning, and I hope everyone can hear me well.
Perfectly, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
No, thank you very much. Maybe let me first just recognize some of the previous speakers and the dignitaries for the session. Mr. Daniel Mnimele, the chair of Nedbank Group, Mfundo Nkuhlu, the Chief Operating Officer of Nedbank, Linda Makalima, Independent Non-Executive Director and Chairperson of the Transformation, Social and Ethics Committee of Nedbank, Kensani Nombanda, also of Nedbank, Anthony Phillipson, British High Commissioner to South Africa, our very own Triple BEE Commissioner, Mr. Tsidiso Matuna, and all other guests. I equally recognize the importance of your participation, and I hope that I've also included in that list Mr. Mike Brown, CEO, and the rest of the executive team from Nedbank. So as the speakers have indicated, my name is Malebo Mabichi-Thompson. I'm ordinarily the Deputy Director General responsible for industrial finance, but I'm also at the moment acting Director General of the department. And I've just been asked to stick to my 10 minutes, and then in that 10 minutes, share with you a government policy on funding criteria, particularly for projects for Black industrialists and women. So I think the first thing, the safest place to start is always understanding why we do what we do. And in this instance, the biggest reason why any government will set aside funding to support private investment is to ensure that they create a productive and attractive destination in their localities for investments to come in. So similarly, we're doing the same. We want to make South Africa an attractive destination for productive investments. Therefore, if you look particularly in the context of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, you will see that our funding is largely biased towards productive sectors of the economy. And when we do that, we've got an architecture that guides us. And in the main, there are three things that we would take into account. The first being that there must be value for money. All of you gathered there are my bosses, in the sense that you pay taxes into the South African system, and therefore we have to be careful and accountable in how we spend that money. So as we support private enterprises to help us with jobs, investment, export, expanding their order book so that others can also benefit, those are the type of indicators we would be looking for as indicators that secure value for money for South Africa. It hardly ever happens that we would support an entrepreneur 100%. In part because these businesses are not state-owned enterprises. These are privately run initiatives. And to make sure that the private sector, the entrepreneurs take ownership in those different ventures, this important aspect of skin in the game, in whatever form, it's what we would also look very closely at. And we would also consider quite closely risk mitigation strategies to give the project the best probability of success. We want to make sure that all of those things have been covered so that we minimize our loss from any transactions that we support and maximize a benefit for society in general for any of this project that we would support. In the area of innovation, our risk appetite changes slightly, where we would be able to do things that otherwise in general running of businesses we wouldn't want to do, which is invest even when the business proposition is still in development. So if it is an expansion enterprise, we expect a very firm proposition to be on spend funds on a private initiative. Now, in the context of the Black Industrialist Program, most of you would know that this was launched around 2016. And when we did this, it was in response to what the market was feeding back to us on why we are not seeing the type of investments and the scale of investment we would want to see in the economy. For Black entrepreneurs, it was this issue of consistent rejection of their applications, particularly by the banks, and they were very clear to us on that one. And the issue was their funding propositions need to be amended such that it allows the bank to come in and also allow the bank to manage its own risk in the process of supporting these projects. And put together the scheme, we were also mindful of the other problem that where you are not being entirely rejected as a Black entrepreneur, you have to struggle with onerous terms where you'd have to pay some of these monies much quicker than ordinarily you'd be made to pay. And in that way, it puts a lot of stress, cash flow stress, on enterprises, and it kills the abilities quickly as they would otherwise grow. So it was a funding challenge that we were resolving with the Black industrialists. And in that, of course, even women-owned enterprises. And this was very important because if you look at our own demographic makeup as a country, we couldn't ignore the source of entrepreneurial dynamism that is in Black industrialists for them to help us of supporting expansion of our export basket, expanding their own order books so that others can be able to service them. So any country around the world, if you look at them, they are mainly supported in terms of their economic growth by their citizens in the main, particularly those that are developed countries. Its citizens, its national champions. When I talk about citizens in the economic context like we are talking now, I'm talking about national champions. You want your national champions to be the ones that are helping you secure some of these big objectives that government on its own can't do. And then, of course, what that does is that when we do put together funding criteria, we then make sure that some of these things are taken care of in the type of funding criteria that we would provide. That's why you would hear people complaining that they're not funding us 100%. It's because we do want the skin in the game. And we want to make sure that entrepreneurs are focusing 100% on the big business of making sure their businesses are successful. The issue of making sure that we are not throwing money down the drain in chase of what is a noble objective, but managing it incorrectly. That's why we have to make sure that projects have risk mitigation strategies and approaches that gives us confidence that they do have a probability of success with our funding coming in. What was very interesting with the Black industrialist support is that one, we saw many banks coming alongside. So it wasn't just the IDC as a development finance institution or the NEF, but many banks also came alongside and were co-funders in some of the BI programs. But government funding on its own remains insufficient in order to drive the type of initiatives that we need to drive in order to deal with the level of unemployment that we are exposed to. There are many ideas out there, many entrepreneurs that are looking for funding. Government on its own cannot do this. That's why it is important that our financial sector also comes into play with some of these initiatives and helps us to fund enterprises. There's still a big concern about the relative value of the loan book of financiers that is directed to the manufacturing sector, that is directed to the productive sectors of the economy. And that is a big discussion that we need to have, because if jointly we are able to avail sufficient enough resources to Black industrialists, to women-owned enterprises, to enterprises in villages and far-flung areas, to innovative ideas from all segments of our communities, we will have or stand a better chance at resolving some of the problems that we want to resolve, and we know that jointly we must resolve, relating to poverty, of unemployment, and the various challenges that even an entrepreneur that may have an idea is unable to be able to get funding and support, because our institutions are in a way more risk averse in some instances than we need to be. So this very important matter of consolidating our partnership between the banks, particularly Nedbank in this instance, and the work that we are doing in the department to support entrepreneurs from communities that were previously disadvantaged, and even other entrepreneurs in South Africa, because where we've got successes, we need to bank them all and bring them into productivity, and as a country start building and expanding our base of national champions to take the country forward. Like I said, the productive sectors that we would focus on: manufacturing, agriculture, agro-processing, infrastructure development, and other job-creating activities. And all of these, I'm sure most of us would agree, form a backbone of any thriving economy. I would maybe during my later session, as we are answering questions, also just share with you some of the important statistics relating to the work that we've done in terms of support to women, support to women-owned enterprises, and some of the sectors that we are finding new entrepreneurs entering the markets, venturing into. An interesting point is that we've got a number of our Black industrialists who are exporters. You know, in economic theory, you're taught that you have to conquer your domestic market before you're able to be successful in other markets. But in this instance, some of our Black industrialists have leapfrogged, and they are conquering the export markets, although locally we may not even be able to recognize some of those labels and their trading names. And it's important that we also work together to domesticate our own entrepreneurs and give them the best opportunities, including through market access, to be able to thrive and succeed. Thank you very much.
Malebo, thank you very, very much. And yeah, we will chat to you in a short while when we do a quick Q&A as well. I would like to call up onto the stage now to present the next case study. And this case study is cracking the code, navigating the funding evaluation process for Black entrepreneurs. So to do that, Lucretia Khumalo, Divisional Executive of Client Support and Growth at the IDC. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. All protocol observed. Malebo had all the names. I don't want to make a mistake. I'd like to acknowledge all the speakers, the organizers, the sponsors, the attendees, those who are in the room, and those that are upstairs, somewhere in the ether. I acknowledge all of you. Thank you for having us and having me speak about what we do at the IDC. So my name is Lucretia Khumalo. I'm the Client Support Executive at the IDC. Essentially what that means is that we look after our portfolio companies. So once we have funded you, you come into our team and we make sure that your business succeeds and that, of course, you're able to pay us. So who is the IDC? So just in the space of who we are, we're one of many state-owned companies that I think Malebo was mentioning upstairs there. Some of them, the Land Bank, ourselves, the DBSA, the National Housing, NEF, CIFA, and National Youth Development Agency. We all play different roles. Our role is to facilitate industrial growth in this country, and we primarily play a role in manufacturing, in mining, and such. Our mandate is to enable progress to industrial development. That's our main mandate. And some of the results of our work can be seen in big companies like Sasol and Kumba, just to name a few. These are companies that were started by the IDC way back when. So our purpose really is to catalyze and grow and sustain the industrial ecosystems. We fund viable projects and businesses competitively, and we really want you to go and succeed in the global landscape. And as was spoken about earlier, in the African continent, we are driving the African continental free trade, and we are driving companies to go in that direction as well. So we partner with you, we fund you, but we also walk with you. And in some instances, your business might be higher risk, and banks may not be able to fund you, so we assist you to unlock that high risk and de-risk your business so that you can be able to operate in the economy. Of course, we're very passionate people and professional in how we deal with your businesses, so we are looking for you to also approach us in that manner. Our footprint, we work across the entire African continent, but of course, South Africa is our home, and so we spend a lot of time in the South African market, but we can do transactions all over the continent. We play a role in many sectors, and I've listed those there. There are too many to list. Mining, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, tourism, movies. I especially love the movies part of what we do. Some of the activities, we partner with you, as I've already said. We finance, and our financing can be in any, whether it's mezzanine, debt, equity. We play along the spectrum so that we can unlock the opportunity. And our clients can be small, can be large, can be medium, can be listed, can be unlisted. We're really not sensitive in terms of that, and I've already mentioned the different products. We primarily prefer to do expansionary financing or just growth of the business. So this is our investment assessment criteria. It usually starts with an inquiry where you come, you speak to us about your business. Then we screen, we check if your business, is going to be successful. You've got a customer, you've got off-takers, you know where you're going to get your raw material, etc. Then we allocate a team to do a detailed due diligence, which is usually a very good interactive process. Lots of learning happens there, and the business case is really put together in that time. Then once all of that is done, of course, we present it to the different committees, depending on size. We agree, we disperse, and then you go into your transaction. The piece that then follows there is where we play a very big role and have increased our role, which is to spend a lot of time monitoring your performance, ensuring that we have value creation plans, we drive the company's ability to deliver on their strategy, we open markets where we can, make sure that the governance is right, ensure that when you need to draw again, all of that happens. And when you get stuck, we help so that you don't stay in that stuck position. So our processes really are focused on filtering applications early. We're trying to get this right because no business person wants to hear the no. Nobody wants to hear the answer no, because everyone believes that their business case is the one. So we're trying to give you a yes or a no as quickly as possible, especially the no, so that you can go and rework that business case. We're guided by a clear investment focus, and then we collaborate internally to make sure that we assist you, and we work very closely with our clients in ensuring that. Just some statistics, just so you know. So we are committed to empowerment. You can see here that 53% of our funding is committed to empowerment. Of the total approvals, you can see we've focused on the different aspects of that empowerment. I think it's not showing properly here. It's the color yellow, makes it difficult. So we've got that first yellow, the 60, that's funds to transformation. The next one is funds to Black industrialization, women-empowered businesses, youth-empowered businesses, black-owned businesses, black-empowered businesses, and then those few other ones that are not necessarily transformation. And this is funding since 2016. So a serious focus. Then which type of businesses do we focus on? Of course, we support distressed businesses to assist them to get out of a distressed position if we think that those businesses have a good chance. But the primary focus of what we do is on expansionary business ownership. And why we do that is, there's no use you buy a business, you continue to operate it the same way, just changing hands. That's not really useful. So what we want is, we want entrepreneurs. If you say you're going to buy a business, so how are you going to make it bigger, better, and more effective? So we do fund the plans to make it bigger and better. We fund a lot of startups. Those are risky, but we think that this economy will only grow if we focus on startups, young people, women, new ideas really. And of course, we do from time to time do ownership change on its own if there's a business plan on what that person's going to do. So this is a very important discussion on, so what are some of the challenges facing SME clients? So actually, this tends to impact on not just smaller businesses, but also medium and sometimes larger ones. Technical challenges. So we see that if the project is not implemented on time or it's not implemented properly, just getting off the blocks becomes very, very difficult. It's either it's late or needs more money, you miss the market, and so forth. If you don't have an off-taker or a single off-taker, that becomes difficult, because that means if your customer stops being your customer, then your business is dead. Or if you don't have an off-taker, but you've got a good idea, if you can't sell your idea, then it's not a business, it's an idea. Then management challenges, I think this is one of the key things that I focus on, even personally, when there's limited expertise and no acceptance that there's skills you don't have. Because in essence, nobody has all the skills, right? So if you can recognize and look at yourself and say, I have these skills, you can then source the skills that you don't have. So we do find that some business people just want to do everything. And so businesses tend to fail when that happens. Some financial challenges, I think Malebu spoke a lot about skin in the game. We speak a lot about mismatch of funding structures where you borrow too much. And now you can't service that debt. That can kill a business. Industry challenges, during COVID, a lot of companies that were in the manufacturing and tourism space suffered a lot from what was going on in the economy. So sometimes they're just industry challenges. Right now with the electricity challenges that we have, some businesses are really prone to that. So we do need to look into that very much. So we are open for business, as I said. I've already explained the focus areas, who we want to fund, and we are innovative in how we do the funding. So we would like you to come and talk to us, especially if you're thinking about anything in the green hydrogen right now, renewable energy, agriculture, and the electric vehicle space. We are still funding all the other traditional businesses on the left-hand side, but certainly we are very active in the new businesses that are opening up in the economy. So yeah, we remain a leader in our space. We value partnerships. We work with all the banks. And so we're inviting you to be bold and bring your business opportunities. And we will work with you to develop them further and ensure that you succeed. Thank you very much, Leanne.
Thank you so much. You want to grab a seat, and then I'll come and sit with you as well. We've got one more case study to get through, and then we'll have a very quick chat. So, talking this time, we're going to be talking about unveiling success, keys to success in the funding evolution process. And Karishma Maharaj is going to present this case study for us. So let's call her up onto stage. Karishma, Workouts and Restructuring Manager at the NEF. Thanks very much, Karishma.
Good morning, everyone. It's still the morning. My name is Karishma Miraj. I am the Turnarounds, Workouts and Restructuring Manager at the National Empowerment Fund. And I'm here today to talk to you about some of the similar things that the IDC has already touched, but I won't repeat. I'll just go to the crux of the matter. And I think today, after listening to some of the speakers yesterday and today, what's important for us is just to make this conversation a whole lot more practical in terms of the how. So we've talked about some of the important concepts in terms of Black empowerment and what we would like to achieve. And the question is also, how do we get there in terms of practical steps? How do you access funding? How do you actually turn your idea into something successful? We would like to see more Black entrepreneurs being built. I feel like I'm so short for this for this podium. I'm actually standing on my toes. I think so. That's better. Okay, so let's just tell you a little bit about the NEF. The NEF is a thought leader in promoting Black economic participation in the country through financial and non-financial support. So in saying that, in terms of what we provide, we don't just provide funding for you and for your business, we also provide you with the hand-holding that you need to make sure that that business venture is successful. Some of our life-to-date milestones for you to get a sense of what we've done so far. We've approved 1,523 transactions worth 13.6 billion rand over the years since inception. We've disbursed 9.1 billion into the economy, and we've had successful clean audits for 20 years running. So as part of the fold of government, and we fall under the DTIC, we're very proud of our track record and to show that that government is actually working for you, and that these are the things that we've managed to achieve in ensuring that money gets into the economy. We've obviously supported a lot of jobs along the way, and we've got a lot of non-financial products, which is investor education, post-investment support, mentorship, and what my unit does as well, which is assisting you with your business should it be distressed, business rescue and things like that. So we really handhold you through the process of running your business to ensure that whatever you do, it does end up successful. We fund across the different sectors of the economy, so everything except for the sin industries, is what we call them. We have a very big focus on the township and rural economy. The property sector, energy as well. We funded a huge number of service stations across the country. Tourism products, all across the country as well. Tourism projects, construction, agro-processing, and a host of other fields. So essentially, we fund over all of the different sectors. And in terms of our investment, our funding units, we've got technically five funds that are listed there. I won't go through each one of them, but essentially you can access funding from 250,000 Rand up to 75 million, depending on what you're looking for. It could be SMME finance, it could be a huge project that you want to start, it could be a rural project. So depending on your needs, there's various products that we have that are designed to cater for that. I won't go through the market failures. My colleague Lucretia has covered some of those. So just to say that, these are essentially the types of issues that we find that we as DFIs collectively are trying to address. So we would like to make sure that the Black entrepreneur that's out there that's trying to actually raise funding for their businesses and that's trying to make a success of it is helped in a non-conventional way where we address the market failures. We do understand that some of these new business people don't have financial acumen. They haven't had the benefit of experience over the years. So we are trying to bridge that gap to ensure that they still are given the opportunity despite the lack of experience, because everyone has to start somewhere. We also assist with some of our additional products, like our business plan toolkit, for example, which is a tool that you can access through our website, which is nefcorp.co.za, where you can actually draft your business plan through the use of the tool on our website. You don't have to use it for the NEF funding application. You can use it for any funding application or any other purpose, but you've got then a proper, structured business plan that is your first step towards raising funding or for you to start your business. And then it forces you to think about the various aspects that you should be addressing in your business plan to make sure that you've thought about the financial aspect, the marketing aspect, the human resource aspect, and it helps you and really guides you through a very user-friendly process for you to start your journey into business ownership. I just want to go to the last point here as well. The other thing that we pride ourselves in doing is actually trying to link business owners with the market and with suppliers. So in as much as you may not have as loud a voice as a single business owner and SMME, the NEF then takes on that role in terms of actually looking at our portfolio and understanding if we've got a client that produces a certain product, we would then, link the two of you for you to maybe work together. Or if we've got a client that can purchase from you and can open up access to export a product, we would then make that effort to do that. So we wouldn't just, say, okay, go out there, run your business and pay back the loan. We would actually say, how can we integrate you such that we've got many SMMEs working together, and in that way we also keep the funds into the same value chain, and everybody benefits from that collaboration. Things that we look at as the NEF in terms of what we call the empowerment dividend. Broad-based Black economic empowerment, of course, is number one because the NEF's mandate is to fund BEE. So we exist for the purposes of funding BEE, and therefore that is the key thing that we would have to consider in the transaction. But it must make financial sense as well. We are a loan funder, so we do need to make sure that the transactions that we fund make financial sense. It is going to be viable. It's going to give you a return. It's going to be able to repay that loan so that we can then fund again to the next person. And then we look at, obviously the ownership, management control. One of the big things that we must consider is job creation, because we have to ensure that whatever we invest in is creating jobs. I mean, we all know the state of the South African unemployment, the rate of unemployment, and the fact that everything we do must lead to solutions to that. We look at what the growth sectors are, and we try to focus on those in terms of our investments. We try to fund across the country, not just focused within not just the major cities, but also the rural areas, the areas that you find are very underdeveloped, where there's not a lot of investment going on. So those are the ones that we also try to consider, and we make a conscious effort to go into the rural communities as well as the townships to stimulate economic activity there. And all of that is done at the end of the day for an investment return, because we do need to be self-sustainable and actually be able to disperse again to the next company down the line. So some of the key things that we do consider in terms of our evaluation process, and it's very much a commercial consideration. The one main aspect is that you must show that you've actually got a business case. So is there a need for your product? Does it make sense for your business to exist? That has to be answered in the affirmative for it to proceed further. So we need to show that there is demand for the product, that you've got feasibility studies or anything else demonstrating that this makes sense, independently. You've got offtake agreements for your product. It makes sense, and it's a commercial entity. There must be operational involvement. So we will not look at transactions where you're purely holding it as an investment, but you're actually involved in something else. You need to be operationally involved in the business that we fund, because we need you to take ownership of the fact that this business has to actually succeed. So the people that are funded by us have to be part of management. They must be involved on a strategic level as well, and they must ensure that the business is operating optimally. And then when you are purchasing a business, we also then assist with, negotiation of that business in terms of getting you a fair deal. Because oftentimes you find that people there's a willing buyer, willing seller, but the buyer is actually going to be paying far too much for that business, such that there's no longer commercial viability. So if there isn't commercial viability and you're paying 3 times as much for that business as you should, it means that you are going to be on the back end, and essentially it's a recipe for disaster. So when we look at funding these businesses, we conduct independent valuations, and we would want you to purchase at a price that is fair, so that it gives you the best chance to make that business work. Where there are contract finance type instruments that we will be using, we look at the rates that you are contracting on and whether that makes sense. We also give you the benefit of our experience in other transactions in the same industry, so that you know whether you are contracting on a fair level. We also look at franchises across the board, provided that it's a reputable brand that we can work with. We've funded many, many franchises over the years. And these are nice lifestyle businesses to keep someone busy, but they must be hands-on, and it must be a franchisor that is supportive as well. And then lastly, we look at, obviously it's important to look at the historical financial performance if it's an existing business. So we have to see that that business makes financial sense. It's not just that we're doing it for us in order for us to get repayment of the loan. We are doing it actually to safeguard your interests, because you'd rather have no business and no funding at all than a huge amount of debt for a business that just will not work. Because at the end of the day, you will still have to pay that debt back, and it puts you in a worse off position. So we try by all means to make sure that we are looking after your best interests in the negotiations that we have. And we then also wanted to just give you a quick snapshot of some of the businesses that we've funded, but not so much the businesses as much as the products that they actually manufactured. So that slide just shows you some of the products that have been manufactured by some of our clients. Obviously, it's a very small snapshot. There's a huge portfolio with a host of different things, but our clients manufacture everything from frozen food products to construction products to mining material, in the healthcare sector, in the furniture manufacturing sector. So you find that there's a very, very wide range of things that we can do. And like Lucretia also mentioned, we also syndicate, so we collaborate with other funders, like the IDC, like the banks. So if your project is bigger than what we can assist you with, we will then package it such that we can fund a portion of it and then partner with another funder that can fund the balance. So that in total, you will have a project that makes sense and that has enough funding to see you through the end. Thank you. If you need any information, please feel free to have a look at our website. This is also an email address that you can email, but on our website you'll find all the details of our product, some of the case studies of the companies that are successfully funded by the NEF. You might recognize some of the names. And I just want to thank you for your time and for listening. And that was my contribution to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Krishna. Would you like to have a seat quickly? I'm just going to take 10 minutes and then we'll break, just to ask 1 or 2 questions. I'm not sure if Malebo is still with us. Malebo, are you still online? Yes, you are. Good to see you. Okay, so Didi, just to expand a little bit, you did a case study on the influence of government policy on funding criteria. So given your knowledge on the topic, what would you say are the key criteria and considerations that funding evaluation processes typically take into account? Because I think that's the kind of information that people really, really need, how applicants can ensure they align their proposals to meet the criteria and then actually qualify for the funding.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. One of the most important things that we would look for in any funding request would be that there is a viable project or a project that has the potential to be viable. So if it's an expansion, we must then satisfy ourselves that there's a market that justifies that expansion. That's why we would be asking you, do you have letters of intent from your suppliers? What do you have that is a business case for this expansion that you're looking for? Then number 2, we would also be looking at projects where you are nearing implementation. So you can't apply, for example, for a project that you only want to implement in 10 years, and then you are applying today. So there has to be eminence in terms of potential for putting that project down as quickly as possible. All the institutions that have spoken, they've indicated the sectors. So be sure to look also at sectors that the institutions are focusing on, but don't be shy to also ask through the inquiries and the client care services in the DTIC. We've got all that on the DTIC website, www.thedtic.gov.za. You'll find that similarly at IDC and also at NEF. So if you find that the sector that you're in is not necessarily part of the sectors that are listed on the website, do ask the question. And then the other issue is businesses are not just about funding injection, but at their core is their ability to succeed because they are serving a particular need in the market. So make sure that there is a clear need that you are serving, because you will be asked about that. The equipment, which is generally what most of the institutions that spoke here today would support, make sure it is from a credible supplier. And that even processes around maintenance, installation, all of those things are sorted in a pre-agreement that says, these are, if you buy from us, these are the type of guarantees that you're going to be able to get from us. Try as far as it is possible to talk directly to the institutions. So don't get to a point where the issue about your application comes because you heard somebody who knows somebody in the DTIC saying you can do this and can't do that. Talk to the applicable people in the DTIC. Those applicable people are on the website, because then they start the process of guiding you, as was already indicated is the case in the IDC. And be prepared to walk us through the transaction, because all that we want is to understand the transaction so that we understand what we are supporting. And then the very last thing, stay away from any activity on inflating prices, bringing in costs that are not related to the project, because once assessors get a whiff of dishonesty around a transaction, your transaction has absolutely zero chance of making it through the system. So first of all, just follow the things. Get the application forms, download them from the right place in the website, try and fill them, and as you're going through that, contact the various client support services that are there. They are there to help the entrepreneurs, and then they will help you go through it. And then from an assessment point of view, they want to make sure that all the information that is required is on the application form. The information is as honest as the applicant can possibly put it through, and where there are gaps, be open enough to say, on this one, I haven't really done what I need to do, because we may be able to say, okay, if you require feasibility around this one point, this is the institution you need to go to, rather than just putting up numbers that don't make sense, because then your application will be kicked out very quickly. Where we are at now as government, our pressure is to support as many enterprises as possible. So approach this transaction as approaching a partner on the other side whose predisposition is to support. And what we do want from you are a number of commitments already secured so that we are able to support. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's really invaluable information. So thank you, DDG. I'm going to leave you there, so I'm not going to ask any questions, but you can stay if you like, or you can log off. So I just want to ask one question to each of our guests here on stage. Lucretia, I mean, what are the common challenges that you find that black entrepreneurs face in the funding process? I mean, there's obviously mistakes and pitfalls that are made that, you know, they make during this application process, which doesn't make them successful.
You know, some of the pitfalls, I mean, I think Malebo has already touched on a lot of them.
Yeah.
But one key pitfall is this issue of the market. So a lot of entrepreneurs have a good product, so you look at it, you assess, okay, it's a good product, but who are you going to sell it to?
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll end up having one off-taker or one customer. So in many cases, that customer is probably an SOE. And that SOE has got a lengthy payment period, or they've got an erratic ordering ability. So they order now, then they don't order. So even if you fund them, that business is not going to be sustainable over the long haul. And the entrepreneur themselves will find that frustrating. So because they have a good product, but they don't have good market penetration, and they're not thinking more broadly about the market, which is why I think earlier on, when Daniel and them were speaking, they spoke a lot about South Africa should not see itself only in the context of South Africa. If you think about it, South Africa has 56 million people. If you compare us to America, America is sitting at close to 500 million. Yeah. If you compare us to China, China has 1.4 billion. So if you were sitting in China and you developed a clever product, you could sell it to 1.4 billion people. Yeah. If you're sitting in South Africa and you develop a clever product and you're thinking only about the South African market, you can only sell it to 56 people. But what if I said to you, if you developed a product and you're sitting in South Africa and you saw the whole of Africa, because now we've got free trade throughout the continent, now your customers, I think now we're sitting at just over 1 billion people for the whole continent. We also have the youngest population. So if your product penetrates the African continent, for the next 10 years, that business is going to be sustainable, it's going to grow, and you will probably be able to penetrate the world. So that's what we really want entrepreneurs to think about, and not to think about themselves and their businesses only from a local perspective. We want them to think more broadly. And of course, there's issues like pricing, the ability to price your product. There's issues around governance that we find a lot of SMEs get trapped by governance and how they are using the funds. I always say, you know what, when you own a business, it's so difficult to be a shareholder. So this is how I explain it. When you're a shareholder in a business, actually it's not your business. Your business belongs to the employees that work for it. It belongs to the creditors. It belongs to the banks. You get whatever is left when all of those people have been paid. You're the last one in the queue. Yep. Now, if you are the entrepreneur and you eat first, it means all these people won't be able to eat. It means they're going to move in and take over the business because the business in the first place belonged to them. So an entrepreneur who doesn't understand that will not be able to grow. So these are just a few of the issues that we found. Of course, there are other technical things, not understanding the full technicalities of the product, the sourcing, the quality of the material that you're sourcing. You now manufacture this product, the quality is not great. Those things do come in. We know about the South African environment with electricity and so forth. Those things do come in, but fundamentally, it's about coming up with a product, understanding the market, and pricing it properly, and respecting the business as an entity.
Love it. Great advice.
Yeah.
And then finally, Kashmina, just to let you wrap this up, feedback. I imagine this plays a role as well, and a very big role in the funding application process. How can applicants actually utilize the feedback from previous applications to strengthen their future proposals and then increase their chances of success?
Absolutely, Leanne. So what we do is that we actually do take the client through the reasons why we would decline an application. And a lot of times it's not necessarily a decline, it's to say, work on these things and come back to us.
Yeah.
Because we do acknowledge that the market that we serve may be, people that don't have previous business experience and may not know the pitfalls of some of the things. So obviously every business owner looks at the positive side of the business, they're excited about the concept, the idea, and all of that. But turning that into something viable is a completely different thing altogether. And it is very difficult to be a business owner. It's one of the hardest things in the world. So we try to give them a very realistic picture of what to expect. The other thing that I think is important in terms of feedback is for them to understand that one of the huge pitfalls is actually the lack of financial management. So you may have everything going for you, but you don't focus on how the money comes and goes. And you find a lot of businesses that actually go into liquidation or business rescue because of cash flow issues. So they literally run out of cash. There's no money to pay employees at the end of the month, not because they don't sell a good product, but they just don't have a handle on the financial management side of the business. So one of the main things that you must do is separate yourself from the business in the sense that you need to understand that you draw a salary, and that salary should be fixed and not, as and when money comes in, you keep drawing and depleting the cash. You need to have that financial discipline as the owner of the business, but also you need to have that, another person in the form of either a finance manager or a CFO, somebody who is actually looking at just purely the financial aspects of the business on a daily basis to make sure that the right financial decisions are being made when it comes to ordering of stock, collecting on your debtors, managing your creditors, because we find that with small business owners, they try to do it all on their own. They focus a lot on the operational side of things, and the financial side of things is really neglected. That's probably one of the main reasons businesses fail in our space, in the SMME space. And if they allow someone else to just take the reins on that side of the business, it really does them a huge favor, because then they can focus on the strategic issues, the operational issues, but the finances are properly managed on the other side. That, for me, is one of the major takeaway points, and what we try to instill. That financial discipline will either make or break your business.
Love it. All right. I'm going to leave it there because I think this information is vital.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about probably one of the most important issues when it comes to funding and how people can apply, how to make them successful. So please, let's give them a final round of applause. And that, of course, was our guests here.
Thank you, Leon.
All right, I know this morning's been quite a long session and a lot of information. I hope you've enjoyed it. We're going to break for about 15 minutes or so, and we'll come back, and we've got lots more for you this afternoon as we resume. So about 15 minutes, please, if you can make your way back inside, and Mint is where we're going to be moving to, and that's going to be the discussion that'll be taking place after the break, as well as Selga. There's so much more to do, but the Mint discussion is going to be focusing on bridging that digital divide, driving ICT partnerships for transformative outcomes. So we'll see you shortly.
At the IDC, we're invested in our common purpose to drive our development mandate and advance the South African economy. We celebrate the moments that build us, the achievements that motivate us, the funding solutions that birth businesses, the communities that progress. We're invested in our people, in our clients, in economic progress, in empowerment. We're invested in transformation.
Sabi girl no dey too like talk. Animals dey in human form. Body man no bustle if you want job. You no finish they won't fight us. If them they run them no fit catch up. I know they form say I too righteous. No con they form say you too like us. We no get the time for the hate and the